Welcome to the best of r/slash by TNA top-notch audio. You are about to hear stories, some previously posted and some brand new, from r/slash idontworkherelady, where we share stories about normal people who are actual customers that are mistaken for employees at that establishment. r/slash entitled parents, where we share stories of moms or dads thinking that because they have kids, they are entitled to everything. r/slash pettyrevenge, where we share stories of small victories over those who wronged you. And r/slash maliciouscompliance, where we share stories of people conforming to the letter, but not the spirit of a request. Kick back and enjoy these stories we are about to share with you. And at the end of this video, make sure to like, comment, and definitely subscribe if you have not already done so. Now, on to the stories. And this story is posted by you/beerbellybegone. Boss, think about whether you want to keep working here. Me? Okay, I don't. Nearly 2 years ago, I started work at company as their digital marketing person. After I started, it turned out that I was brought in to put out the fires left by my predecessor, the VP marketing, who had a team of 4 plus himself, spent over $1 million in 1 year, and brought in 5 deals, 2 of them for under $10,000. As you can well imagine, after a performance like that, I had lots of work to do and very little time to do it with. Aside from 1 or 2 paid tools, everything else was to be done using free tools only. I'm going to do some bragging here. I beat the previous year's figures in all categories with 10% of the budget. When I started, I thought Bossman, founder and CEO, had a really good management style, saying things like, "Your successes are yours, your mistakes are mine," and "the enemy of good is great." I don't expect perfection. I want you to make sure things work and get them done. In essence, I was allowed to run my own one-man department and outsource freelancers, and as long as I was getting results, he left me alone. Since I was the only person on the marketing team, I also had to learn a large number of skills and platforms that weren't directly related to digital marketing. Not to say everything was perfect, but things were pretty good. One of the main things that weren't perfect was that Bossman had serious anger management issues. As I said before, he left me alone, but I saw him blow up at and fire other people for stupid spit. He lost it at me too, once or twice, but he calmed down after a couple of hours and things would be back to normal. If it looks like an abusive relationship, that's because looking back, that's exactly what it was. As the year came to an end, I approached Boss and initiated a performance review. I ran him through everything I had done in the past year, and he was pretty surprised at how much I had done with so little. I asked him for a raise, pointing out that I was currently making $8,000 a month in local currency, averages $4,500 a month, when people with my, now argumented, skill set were making between $13,000 and $14,000 a month. I asked him for $12,000. He said he'd get back to me and never did. Every time I asked him about my raise, he had another excuse. After the last excuse, I began looking for something else. The other day we had a meeting, and it turns out that 2 months ago I made a mistake. It wasn't a critical mistake, and it was rectified within a few hours of discovering the mistake. No harm or damage was caused whatsoever to company, but Bossman flipping lost it. I mean, slamming on tables, yelling for the whole office to hear, what have you. Then he said the magic words, "Pack your things up and go home. Think about whether you want to keep working here." So that's what I did. And 10 seconds later, I said, "No, I don't." I started packing my spit up while he turned an even deeper shade of red and got even louder. I didn't answer him at all, just kept on packing up my things and saying goodbye to my colleagues. Turns out that being ignored really pushed his buttons to the point where he started threatening to call security to have me removed while I was actively removing myself and my things from the office. Here's the part where it gets beautiful. My country is very strict on employees' rights. Sorry, Americans, I feel your pain. His words and behavior are considered an improper dismissal. By law, he's required to give me 30 days notice of dismissal, which he didn't. When he realized his mistake, he convened a pre-dismissal hearing, but it was already too late. He opened himself up to a lawsuit, which I'm already talking with lawyers about. Because by law, he has to give me those 30 days notice, even though he's already fired me. For the next 30 days, I'm eligible for all the benefits and social rights in my salary, but I can do jack spit for him, and there's nothing he can do to me without making the incoming lawsuit 10 times worse. I've already got 4 interviews lined up for next week, paying almost double what boss was paying me, and best of all, I'll be interviewing for other places on his dime. The cherry on top is that because I'm the only marketing person, without me, nothing happens in the marketing department for the next month, and if he doesn't hire someone on in time, I won't be around to answer any questions the new person might have. And this story is posted by Outsmarted. I can't sell you this animal. So just before Christmas, I got 2 little rats who are my absolute life. I spend more money on treats and toys for them than I do food for myself. They came from my local pet store, and it also happens to be where I go for most of their stuff. I made an effort to learn as much as I could about my animals before I got them and carried this on after getting them. At this point, I know how to handle and deal with them more than the staff there do. They only get basic handling training. It's not their fault. So sometimes the staff asks me questions that can help them in the future. Mid-lockdown, I went in to grab some food and bedding for my 2 boys when I was pulled to the tank of rats with 2 boys in it. I had handled the boys already when they were little before the lockdown. That was about 8 weeks prior. Asked about the selling policies because they were getting too big for the tank, and I felt really bad for them. After some time talking to the staff, the manager eventually let me adopt them because they trusted I could give them a loving home and the attention that they just won't get in the store. They are the most spoiled rats ever, I swear. Since then, I've been in a lot, buying stuff and talking to the staff and getting to know them well. Due to the distancing restrictions, the animal area is barricaded off so customers can't get in there. One of the managers came up to me asking if I'd be able to have a look at a couple of the girls they have had as well since before the lockdown, because one of them seems aggressive. They don't know how to handle her or what to do. I take a look and quickly deduct that she is almost completely blind. I offer to come in and handle her whenever I can, and they agree that would be a good idea. I like to add that store policy restricts employees from handling animals outside of selling and feeding, which they hate as much as I do. After handling her and her sister for a while, I stood near their checkout chatting to the staff member on duty. We'll call him Jay, for a while. In this time, maybe 5 minutes, there was a woman, we'll call her Karen, with a young boy, maybe 6, who started scoffing at us. I was wearing black jeans and a Rick and Morty print tee. Don't judge me, it was cheap. And the staff uniform is black cargo pants and a bright colored polo, usually green or blue, for all staff members. Jay and I share a glaze that says, "Here we go." Jay, in the best customer service voice I've heard. "Hi, how can I help you today?" Karen, "My son wants a rabbit. He can't go and see them. Move the barricade so he can pick one." Jay, "I'm sorry, but I'll have to ask you to wait for my colleague to come back from her break so she can help you." Karen scoffs, "You can help us, can't you?" Jay, "I apologize, but someone has to be on the register at all times. I can't leave. My colleague will be back in a minute to help you." Karen, gesturing to me, "Well, why can't she help me?" Me, "Oh, I'm sorry, Karen, don't talk back to me. I saw you in there alone, so you can help us." Jay, "Ma'am, she doesn't work here." Karen, "Then why can she go in and I can't?" Jay, "She's a trusted customer who knows how to handle our rats. She was simply looking in on them as one of them seemed to be blind. She confirmed that for us." Karen, "This is disgusting. Why are you allowing one customer in but not me? My poor baby just wants a rabbit to play with. It's that too hard for you to understand?" Jay, "As I said, my colleague will be back soon to help you. Feel free to look from the barrier." Karen, looking at me, "You obviously work here. Why else would you be talking to the staff? Now move the barrier so my son can look at the bunnies." Me, "Seriously, I don't work here. I was just checking the rats." Karen, "Then fine. Check the rabbits so my son can pick one." Me, "I can't do that. It's not my job and I know nothing about them." Karen, "I want to see you fired, refusing to help a customer. This is unacceptable." About now is when the other employee, we'll call her Tara, comes out. She was wearing a different color to Jay. Tara, "Is everything okay here, Jay?" Karen, "Are you the manager? I want this girl fired. She refused to help me." Tara, she doesn't work here, miss. Is there something I could help you with? Karen, my son wants to buy a rabbit, but this girl refused to help. What kind of store is this anyway? I gesture by to Tara and Jay while she is on her rant and start heading to the door. Karen, where do you think you're going? I want to see you get fired. Your attitude towards me was very rude. Tara looks at me and we both sigh. Tara, OP, I'm sorry, but we're going to have to let you go. We don't tolerate rude behavior towards customers. Me, realizing this is the only way it will be sorted. What? No, I love working here. Tara, I'm sorry, but was unacceptable. You have been a good employee until now. Thank you for working with us. I pretend to look sad and walk out. A couple of days later, I went back in and Jay was on the tills again. I asked him what happened after I left, and he told me that she was unimpressed with how we treated her, so she will find somewhere else to get her son a rabbit. The store holds the right to decide if someone can purchase an animal, and I doubt they would have let her anyway. And this story is posted by u/Augusta13, How I Outsmarted a Passive-Aggressive Radio Station Changing Colleague. Ashley has always been petty and passive-aggressive. The day she was hired, she straight up refused to do anything even remotely challenging, and if anyone questioned her, she would give them the silent treatment. The girl could hold a grudge like no one else and never forgot any time she's ever been wronged. I played nice with her for several months, trying to make her feel welcome and feel comfortable with her task at work, but the more I gave, the more she took. The more she settled in, she became more bold with passing off her work to others and would straight up ignore anyone who even politely questioned her. Office management knew Ashley personally and refused to address any problems, advising staff to talk to her on her own. Of course, with Ashley giving almost everyone the silent treatment, talking to her was ineffective. Girl would literally roll her eyes, get up, and walk away from you mid-sentence. Ashley and I shared a workspace most days. There was a small radio and iPod dock in between our desks, and the general office rule has always been, whomever gets there first gets to pick the radio station for the day. It always worked well because opening staff was scheduled on a rotating basis, so we all got a fair shot. So, tension in the office is at an all-time high. It's almost impossible to get anything done effectively because this girl will not speak to anyone even when it is a legitimate question about our work. She's taken to changing the radio station to country music, knowing I hate it, every day when I take a lunch break. Whatever, I let that spit go. But she can see it's not affecting me, so she starts to ramp it up. She starts changing the station every time I walked away from my desk briefly, waiting until I used the restroom or walked to the water cooler. I've tried to be the bigger person, but after weeks of her passive-aggressive BS and still refusing to speak or even work, I've had enough and dropped to her level. I started changing the radio station back when she walked away from her desk. It became this whole back and forth petty thing, constantly waiting for the other to walk away briefly. After a week, I knew it was time to step it up and put her in her place. The iPod dock was mine personally, so I took it home for the night. I opened it up carefully and disconnected the electronics under the station change buttons. I kept the remote for the dock in my desk drawer and discreetly returned it to the office. When I stepped away from my desk, she was now turning the volume all the way down. So the dock came back home with me where I disconnected all of the buttons, and it will only operate with the remote that Ashley doesn't know about. I can see Ashley absolutely stewing in her rage over this. After a few days, she starts unplugging the radio from the power when I step away. This is where I play dumb with, oh, it looks like the plug fell out. It keeps happening. I wonder if we need to call an electrician. After a few days of this, she has taken the radio and put it in our manager's office with a sticky note about how the office has voted and we no longer want a radio at work. Now, I play Spotify on my desk, and until Ashley got fired, I would be sure to play country music a few days a week just to rub it in a little. I wouldn't say I'm proud of my actions, but darn did it feel good to watch her squirm. Edit. Ashley worked with me for years. Nothing happened to her because management was an absolute joke and happened to be friends with her. She got fired the same time management did, which was about 6 years too late. And this story is posted by u/destructive_goddess. My mom thinks my sister is entitled to my grandparents' will. So this is a generally long story dating back about 8 or 9 years ago from the beginning until now. So, bit of context and backstory here. My father's side of the family, Nanny and Granddaddy, are quite wealthy and well off. They own practically an entire city. The land belonged to my grandfather's parents and was split between him and his two siblings, all adopted. This left him at about $2.8 billion in worth after he passed away in 2017. So, my sister and I were pretty well off in our financial areas in life, as were my half brother and all of our cousins, second cousins, our aunt, and dad. So, come about 9 years or so ago, my sister set out for college, which she could attend for about 2 years on her own because of her grades. Our mom gave her her car, mom's, and my grandparents decided to graciously pay for all of my sister's expenses, her apartment, her food, her transportation, any extra classes she was supposed to take or wanted to take, and in general, everything she needed or wanted. So throughout about 4 or 5 years of college, they paid for her switching classes 2 or 3 times, sent her checks monthly for food and transportation, bought her books for her and gave her extra in case she needed it. She chose to spend almost all of this money going out and partying with her friends, taking them to our expensive restaurants for dinner and hauling them around wherever they wanted to go. Well, sometime in between her years there, she got $12,000 back from something that happened there. Housing payment rolled back, I think, not sure, that belonged to my grandparents. She wasted all of that partying and living it up with her friends without ever bothering to ask who it belonged to or checking in with anybody first. My grandparents weren't happy about the money she stole from them. She was supposed to send it back to them. By the end of her college, when she was supposed to graduate, everyone came to visit her, all of our great aunts, great uncles, cousins, a lot of people. We're talking maybe 20 people. Most of them were elderly and many didn't even live in our state. They had to fly and book hotels and extra transport costs. Pretty sure my grandparents paid for all of that for them to celebrate her graduation. And this included my grandma and grandpa themselves. My grandpa was strapped to an oxygen tank and wasn't able to move much. He was wheelchair bound and his health was already ailing by the time she graduated. And her college was high up in the mountains, so it wasn't easy for him to be there to begin with, let alone the 9-hour drive it took to get up there for them and everyone else who came. So they all attended her graduation, and my sister had a mental breakdown, conveniently, and decided to say F everyone else. She talked to our dad and his wife, and that was it. She blew everyone else off. She wouldn't talk to our grandparents. She wouldn't talk to anyone else who came up to see her. She just ignored all of them and left the campus. I spent time with my grandparents and some of our great aunts and uncles in her stead because holy hell, she was so effing rude. I even hate her for that. And then I left with our mom to help her finish packing the apartment up so she could move back down. Well, our grandparents and family had a special party planned for her, and she knew this, but instead of going to see any of them or even attending her part that they paid a lot of money to set up for her, she went to visit our dad instead and then left back towards the city, completely bypassing the mall and didn't give a single F about it. So, she ends up a little ways down the road getting a boyfriend. Our grandparents on mom's side of the family had already cut her off. Grandma was your typical extremely racist old German woman. Grandpa had already died of cancer long before any of this. And Nanny and Granddaddy were the only ones left she could show them off to. So we all went to visit them and we went out to eat, and Nanny actually started talking shite about her right in her face while she was there, completely ignoring her existence, and went off about how she stole their money and how angry they were because of how disrespectful she had been toward them, which I wholeheartedly agree with. My sister got pissy and threw a tantrum and started crying. Mom started getting pissy and lying about how it was her money and not my grandparents', and that ended rather poorly. So my sister stopped visiting them because my grandma refused to give her any money when she visited, but always gave me some. She used to always give us a few hundred for visiting and got very angry when I mentioned that mom made me give my sister at least $100 to $200 of whatever Nanny gave me after each visit after she cut my sister off. So Nanny told me stop letting them know I had money from her, which, granted, was hard to do because she always gave me money and everyone knew it, but I guess she jumped on my mom about it because my mom stopped demanding I share eventually. They took it as offensive, or at least Nanny did, and that only made them angrier. Over the course of 2 or 3 more years, my grandpa's health got worse slowly, and while I like to believe he forgave her, or at least moved on and let it go, my grandma didn't. Eventually, October 2017 rolled around and my grandpa was dying. My sister finally went back to visit them, And this was only because he was dying and we forced her to come with us. He was kind to everyone, even her, as he passed away on the 17th, a few days after we had last visited. He had cut his oxygen supply off and let himself go after all family had gotten to say goodbye for the last time. So it was just Nanny now, and every time I visited her, I swear, she was going off about MU's sister stealing and being disrespectful, and how my mom was trying to cover up for her, and I knew. I mean, it wasn't anything new to me, but eventually I did try to tell her gently that it wasn't worth clinging to because it'd only make her unhappy and miserable if she did. Money isn't everything, and they helped me see that over the years, so I tried to get her to lay off a bit and let it go, but she didn't want to. Well, Granddaddy had a will that granted all of us, my sister included, roughly $150,000 to $280,000 in a trust fund that will continue to grow over the years, will be accessible after Nanny dies. And I guess she still hasn't let this go 3 years later because we just got a letter in the mail saying that Nanny removed my sister from the will. I don't blame her for it. My sister is a real piece of work. She's money hungry, spoiled, just bad in general. She's our mom's little angel, so she gets away with everything and never cares about it. But my mom got so angry about it that she actually threatened to sue my grandma for removing my sister off the will, and later, after calling my grandma and chickening out of going off on her because Nanny is just one of those people you don't want to piss off, she demanded that I share my portion of the will with my sister. I told her no. She's an idiot. My sister deserved this, and I'll never see it as otherwise. She only ever visited for money. She never bothered to speak to them. Whether they accepted her warmly or not didn't matter. She was extremely rude and never felt any remorse for her actions. I don't blame her for removing my sister. It's her money and her right to remove my sister if she wants to. My mom is stupid for wanting to fight her in court over it. My mom never seen the problem with how disrespectful and rude my sister had been and continues to be, and that's why she was removed. My grandma says Granddaddy did it before he passed. Whether that's true or not, I doubt it honestly, but in any case, I don't blame her. My sisters, like my parents, both are money hungry, rude, and uncaring people. And this story is posted by u/antipatico_6. My first job was a lesson in work to rule, a very obedient payback. I got hired onto my first job when I was 17. It was something of a fast food/coffee shop blend, and in my region, there are more of these chains than there are Starbucks chains. After a 10-minute interview and some paperwork, I was hired on. I would later find out that minors were the preferred hires at this location since it was likely their first job and they might in turn be unfamiliar with labor laws. My mother makes a decent income going to work sites and dealing with on-site injuries, labor rights infractions, and so on. Her job is to make workplaces safer and spare them potential lawsuits. Through the stories she shared and the online handbook I devoured about labor rights in my region, I had a decent picture of how ethical workplaces operate. As it turns out, my new workplace was not so ethical. Your breaks were considered more of a privilege than a right, and you could be pulled out of your break to help up front at any time with no opportunity to make up that break time later. I earned a great deal of scorn from my manager by asking for a 30-minute break on my 7-hour shift instead of a 15-minute one. Here, you are legally entitled to 30 minutes for every 5 hours worked. There were so many weird corner-cutting things going on that could create a disaster scenario in terms of safety. Climbing on whatever is available instead of using a ladder, the ladder was broken, poor food safety, and the occasional fire in the toaster oven because new hires weren't instructed on how to use it safely. Not much instruction on how to use the corrosive cleaners, and if you had to clean the oven in the back kitchen, you were lucky if you received an unused mask or PPE that wasn't damaged. Burns, rashes, sprained ankles, and cuts were not uncommon. I badly burned my arm with hot coffee and immediately went to treat it, then asked for the right forms to fill out to report on my injury. I was scolded for leaving the front end, told there were no forms, and informed that no one reports on burns anyway. If we reported every burn or slip and fall in a coffee shop, we'd never get through all the paperwork. The burn blistered with time and eventually required some prescription antibiotic cream from my physician. I was fed up, but intimidated at the thought of trying to formally report these people for safety and labor violations. Everyone else seemed to accept what was going on. I was trying to save money to move out, and in my head, the odds of getting hired elsewhere seemed slim. I decided to do something unconventional. I thought I was the first to come up with it at the time, but I would later find out that my plan was a classic workers' protest tactic. I was going to work to rule, follow every policy to the exact letter, which would inevitably slow things down and create obstacles to efficiency. It started with the cappuccino machine and the ice drink machine. The cappuccino machine is to be cleaned once daily, and the ice drink machine is to be changed weekly. These are both lengthy processes that leave the machines out of commissions for a while. No one did it regularly, and we had an issue in the past where we got complaints about the taste of ice drinks, only to pop the top off the machine and discover some kind of filmy, moldy growth on the surface. Seemed like a good place to start. I took great care to drain them and give the detachables parts a long soak and a thorough scrub. This angered customers who wanted their drinks right away. I had been there for a while at this point and instructed anyone I trained not to hesitate to get the manager if their customer has an issue they can't resolve. And so it went that every shift involved me cleaning some machine and my manager placating impatient customers. We had this pre-prepared specialty tea that almost never got ordered, but nonetheless, it was policy to change the pot of tea every 30 minutes for freshness. No one did this. The tea would sit for hours. I decided this tea needed special attention and made sure I was changing it regularly. The result was that we went through our stock faster than we ever had before. We frequently ran out, and the stock orders had to be changed to accommodate a greater supply of the tea. I took care to check our freshness dates on the prepackaged foods. If it was expired, it was trash. This pained me, and I don't like to waste food, but we had a strict policy on freshness of product. I tried to wiggle on this, only throwing it out if it was 3+ days over. Nonetheless, the result was empty display cases, low stock, and a need to, again, adjust stock to accommodate for the food supply needs that come into play when policy is actually being followed. I was assigned the sandwich and soup station, perhaps in an effort to keep me away from other things. However, it was wonderful new territory to work to rule. I changed gloves after every order, as the handbook indicated we should. I took care to clean out all the receptacles before putting new toppings in them. The handbook indicated we were supposed to cool vats of soup in ice baths to bring them to a safe temperature before storing them in the fridge. I made sure it was done, which was inconvenient to management when they could have had me working on something else before the shift was over. I kept abiding by the rules, rigidly and to their fullest extent. Management was incredibly pissed off and communicated as much when I wasn't around. However, I had turned 18 by this point. I could now legally work past a certain time, supervise the teenage employees, and close the store. Until they hired on someone else who could work the hours I was working, it was something of a pickle for them. I also offered no hostility or indication I was being spiteful. If you were on the outside looking in, you might see me as an employee who did the jobs no one else wanted to do. It wouldn't have been easy to call me out to higher-ups. My coworkers, despite the inconveniences by proxy they probably had to put up with, didn't seem to mind. They were interested to see how it would play out and told me as much. I decided to quit after a conversation with the store owner herself. She indicated that she wasn't fond of kids who think they know how to run a business she's been running for years, and had some other choice words for me. I told her on the spot, "Oh, I understand completely. I'll submit my written notice for you tomorrow." My resignation letter wasn't just a resignation letter. The first few lines were as much. What followed was a list of safety infractions and labor law violations with dates and examples attached. It was incomplete since I only started recording these a few months in, yet it managed to be pretty extensive. I said something along the lines of, "I trust you will address these problems in a timely manner." There was a quiet implication in some of my other language that the Better Business Bureau, Health Inspector, and associated safety organizations in my region would be happy to help them out. I gave 2 weeks' notice in the interest of my coworkers who would have had to take extra shifts if I left abruptly. I was scheduled for 5 of the 14 days. They wanted me out, and they wanted me out as soon as they could get me out. I didn't return to this location for several months, even though I lived fairly close to it. I eventually got curious and went back to check things out. The place looked very different. You walked in, and it just felt cleaner. The employees looked happier, though I didn't see any familiar faces. The location had come under new ownership and had been completely turned around. I have no idea if I played a role in the store changing hands or getting fixed up. I only know that for several months, I was a relentless pain in the butt for quietly, obediently following the rules, and I left a letter in my wake that created unease. And this story is posted by u/GingerDaisy03. Had to tell an ex-employer, I don't work for you. 3 years after quitting. So, I worked for a home care agency and was assigned to an independent living facility. Mostly just med reminders and housekeeping. The company I worked for was shady AF. So much happened, I'm surprised I stayed as long as I did, but I'll stick to what's relevant here. This may be long. So, Cliff Notes, they cut my hours on days and evening to the point I lost my benefits. I took the full-time nights posting. It was just me and one other girl switching off 12-hour nights, 4 days, 1 week, 3 the next, 11 p.m. to 11 a.m. It was great and I loved it. Work was easy and I still got to see my residents. I usually got there at 10:30 p.m. to get report from the evening worker so she could leave by 11. My duties all night were get report, sign out keys, organize that day's paperwork, set the dining room for the next day, do like 4 people's laundry, had access to 5 washers and 5 dryers, and do room checks on like 10 people every 2 hours. Pop my head in to make sure they weren't on the floor, and answer any emergency pages. Everything but checks and pages were done by 3 a.m., sometimes 2 a.m. Well, they hired a guy and decided to give him 2 of my shifts and 2 of the other girls' shifts. I was in charge of training him and had to sign off before he worked independently. I wasn't impressed, but said fine. First shift, he shows up at 4 a.m. Shift starts at 11. Work's now done, go home. Next shift, 7 a.m., he comes in, same thing. Next 2 were no-shows. Then finally showed up. He was awful. I started looking for another job and found one quickly. I tried for 4 days to hand in my 2-week resignation. Supervisor isn't available, office is locked, on a Tuesday at 10 a.m.? So I dropped it in their mailbox, and when they called me, I told them the date stated would be my last day. Fast forward 2 weeks. I get a call to go in. I explain I quit, why I quit, and that I don't work for the company anymore. Repeat this sporadically over the next 2.5 years. I got calls at all hours. I called the area coordinator, the regional coordinator, always being assured it won't happen again. My final straw was a 4 a.m. phone call 3 years after I quit from the after-hour scheduler. Lost my spit. Called corporate and made them delete my number and file and told them, I haven't worked for you for 3 effing years. The lack of having any schedule should have been a effing clue. Your company calls me again and I'll file harassment charges. Figure your effing spit out and stop effing calling me. I don't work for you. And hung up. Been a year now and I think it finally worked. And this story is posted by u/13petrichor. One way only. So at my local grocery store, due to COVID-19, they have put markings on the floor of most of the aisles that are about 6 feet apart that say, one way, don't pass, and point in the direction they want you to go. This is to reduce the chance of breathing in people's faces when you pass by and making shopping more orderly while maintaining social distancing. I have only gone shopping a couple times during the pandemic and always forget that the aisles are one way. One aisle that doesn't have this rule is the wine and beer aisle. Not sure why, but probably because it's fairly wide. The store recently reorganized, so when I went shopping, I ended up roaming up and down the aisle trying to find my preferred beer. While I was searching, I noticed a particular middle-aged white woman, you know the kind, absolutely stuffing her cart full of every single bottle of Cupcake Sauvignon Blanc that was on the shelf. Every time I passed her, she would huff and puff and shove herself against the wall to be as far from me as possible in the most exaggerated way. When I noticed her doing that the 3rd or 4th time and realized which wine she was hoarding, I decided to grab some because that's my mom's favorite wine. I approached where she was and knowing she would soon leave the shelf empty, vaguely gestured toward the shelf she was at, signaling that I wanted to grab something. She stepped aside and I grabbed 2 of the remaining 4 bottles at the very back of the shelf. When she saw me doing that, despite the fact that she had 8 bottles of the stuff in her cart already, she let out a loud ugh And when I walked away, I heard her say, "Are you effing kidding me?" I was irritated, but decided to ignore and be understanding. Clearly, we had started our shopping at a similar time because I saw her in the next aisle I went to, and as I entered, she started shooing me in the other direction while saying, "One way, mister, one way only." At that point, I was sufficiently annoyed and decided to be a butt, so I skipped that aisle and started shopping in front of her while taking my sweet time. I heard her tapping her foot or sighing or muttering to herself plenty of times and felt satisfied, so I pulled off after exiting an aisle and let her go in front of me. She was definitely irritated at me still because in the next few aisles she was shopping very slowly and kept looking back in my direction. We got to the absurdly large selection of spices that took up half the length of an aisle, and she headed straight for the end, probably not realizing that everything had been moved around. I was leisurely following behind, browsing for what I need when I heard her call back to me and ask if I could back up so she could look where I was for the parsley flakes. Obviously, I couldn't let this opportunity pass, so I looked at her with a smile so big she could see it even through my mask and said, "It's a one-way aisle, ma'am. One way only." She left the aisle saying something about kids and no respect, and I finished my shopping feeling satisfied with my pettiness. And this story is posted by u/Freedom Forge. Entitled Mother Steals My Shopping Cart. Entitled Daughter Gets Mad. Me is me. My mom is mom. Entitled Mom is EM. Entitled Daughter is ED. My mom's friend that works at Costco's Steve. This happened a month ago. All right, here's some background. Me and my mom are both essential workers. My mom is a supervisor at a homeless shelter in NYC, and I babysit for one of her employees. The baby is 6 months old and therefore is in a high-risk population for COVID-19. I am also in a high-risk population because I have asthma. My family shops at Costco's because we have a 5-person household. My mom is a single mom with 4 kids and buy all of our food wholesale. My mother was a germaphobe years before the pandemic started, so carry around hand sanitizers and Clorox wipes everywhere she goes. So, about a month ago, me and my mother set out to go to Costco's as we do every week. My mother brings her own Clorox wipes to wipe down the shopping carts because the people wiping down carts at the front door don't change their wipes and they are always visibly dirty. Not faulting Costco's, they are doing their best. As soon as we walk in, I see a large teddy bear that I saw last week that I really wanted and didn't have the money on me to pick it up. I got paid earlier that day, so I had the money for the teddy bear on me, so I picked it up that day. As I was about to put it in the cart, my mother told me to hold it because the carts are dirty and my mother only wiped off the baby seat in the cart and the cart handle. So we continue our journey around Costco's and start picking up our items. We got some mushrooms, orange juice, a bunch of fruit, and 2 types of milk because I am lactose intolerant. At this point, the cart is about halfway full and my mother leaves the cart with me outside the freezer section so she can pick up the veggies. I turn around to look for these portable cups of guacamole that Costco's has, and when I start to walk back to the cart, I see that a woman has our cart. I start looking around to see if she maybe moved my cart and that was her own, but there were no abandoned carts around. I start staring at our cart and start recounting all the stuff we picked up so far. Then I saw my mother's plastic bag that she left her purse Clorox wipes and Lysol in, so I realized this was my cart. Me: "Excuse me, that is not your cart." EM looks at me like I have 5 heads. Me: "That's my cart. Can you please let go of it?" EM blinks at me and doesn't respond. Me: "Ma'am, that's not your..." EM puts her dirty butt leather purse on top of our strawberry and starts to walk away with my cart. At this point, I'm effing pissed. So I run over to the cart and stop the cart with my leg because my hands are full, and use my authoritative voice that I used when children were misbehaving back when I was a camp counselor. Me: "Please step away from the cart. It is not yours." EM snaps out a daze, "What are you talking about?" Pushes the cart onto my leg. Me: "Look down. This isn't your cart." EM looks startled, picks up her purse, and walks away. Me: sighs and puts down the guacamole and begins to switch out the strawberries EM put her purse on. Enters ED. ED, yelling, "Did you just scream at my mother?" Me: No, she tried to take my card and I told her to stop. ED, still yelling. She said that she is sorry. Next time, don't scream at her like that. Me, steps back from ED. I didn't scream at her and I really don't care. Please leave me alone. It's over now. I think it's a good time to note that ED and EM didn't have their mask on, even though that it was state ordinance to wear masks in public and Costco's policy to wear masks while in store. ED was getting in my face while yelling at me. My mom comes back with all the veggies she picked up and starts unloading them into the cart. While she is unloading the veggies, I explain to her what just went down and ask her to wipe down the cart again. ED, screaming at me across the aisle. She said she was sorry. Me, I don't care and I wasn't talking to you. Please leave me alone. ED, don't be rude, little girl. Mom, I'm sorry. She can have a rude tone sometimes, but she was just telling me what happened so I can wipe down the cart. ED, do you think we are dirty or something? At this point, my mom tells me to ignore her and she wipes down the cart so we can go on with our shopping. A few moments later, my mom's friend Steve walks up to us and asks us what ED was talking about. Apparently, ED told Steve, a Costco employee, that me and my mother were harassing her. We explained what happened and went about our day. ED also gave me a death stare when I was getting my Costco hot dog after we checked out. And this story is posted by u/Nelly Spitzig. Can't stay past my clock out time? No problem. This is a story from about 6 years ago, back when I worked as a waitress. All names are fake for the purpose of privacy. The summer between grade 11 and 12, I worked at a small family-owned restaurant about a 20-minute drive from my house. I live fairly middle of nowhere, so this restaurant and 2 others serve basically the whole county. So, even during the dead time of winter, we were often busy. But we're also directly on a path from a big city to a large lake, so we're especially busy in summer. The people that ran the restaurant were a married couple. The wife, Sandra, was generally lovely, but the husband, Marvin, had a very short temper. I think I can count the number of times he talked to me without yelling on one hand. I picked up in the job easily enough. I'm very extroverted and friendly, so a lot of the customers loved me. Sandra decided to train me to do the opening shift at the restaurant. She would stay in the back and help me prep and other things as I got used to the setting. Marvin was against this from the onset, saying I wasn't there long enough to be taking on this commitment. This malicious compliance took place about midway through June. After 2 weeks with Sandra helping me out, she stops coming by to help, and I'm there with the singular cook until lunch when I get relieved by another staff member. So it just so happens that the next few weeks were going to be gorgeous weather, so my first week without Sandra, we get slammed. The waitress that relieves me, Bonnie, is my senior. So, as Sandra and Marvin have told me, Bonnie can ask me to stay to help out, and it's like them asking me to stay. Bonnie asked me to stay and help out every day that week. Marvin sees my time clocked in and out and freaks out, saying he knew I wasn't trained enough and that I was using that excuse to get more hours, even though I was getting 25 plus every week and had a second job. I knew better to say anything back, and then he told me I wasn't allowed to stay past my time anymore. I confirmed with him that, no matter what, I shouldn't stay past my time. He yells that unless him or Sandra specifically tell me to stay, I can't stay past my time. I smile and tell him no problem. So I'm opening all of next week, and like the week before, we're slammed. It looks like there's going to be no reprieve as my time to clock out comes. I tell Bonnie I'm leaving, and like usual, she asks me to stay. I shrug and say Marvin told me explicitly I couldn't take her word for asking me to stay. Bonnie is pissed. She agrees that I can leave, and she phones Sandra and Marvin. Sandra phones me and asks me if I can come back, but I'm already at home at this point and I refuse. So her and Marvin have to leave their house to go help out. I come into work the next morning to open, and both Sandra and Marvin are there. Marvin starts yelling at me about how I just left when it was so busy, and I calmly remind him I was told to leave unless him or Sandra specifically requested it. He's grumpy and says I should know what he meant. So I ask if So can take the relieving waitstaff word for asking me to stay. He disagrees, and instead I have to phone him before I leave. Sandra starts arguing with him, saying that's ridiculous and to just let us make the judgment call as we're the ones out there and know what's happening. But Marvin is sticking to his guns, and Sandra just rolls her eyes and walks away. So obviously, here comes malicious compliance part 2. I phone him at the end of every one of my shifts, even when I have to close or it's dead. I always said I just wanted to be sure this time, since he was so upset last time. This lasts for a little over a week before he finally gives up and says, it's fine if I or another waitstaff make a judgment call to stay past the time if it's busy. And this story is posted by u/Michelle Bites. Karen needs her very own checkout lane. This happened several years ago. I was shopping at Garden Ridge, which sold household items, decor items, gifts, and craft supplies. It was a huge store with 2 entrances and 2 sets of checkout lanes, 1 set at each entrance. I was casually shopping when a round woman in her 50s or 60s got right in front of my cart. She glared at me, and I tried to go around her, but stopped me again, saying, "You gonna help me or not?" I said, "What?" "I need a register open so I can check out." I looked at her, astounded. I said, "I don't work here, but there are registers open at the other entrance," to which she replied, "I don't want to walk to those registers. Now open one and check me out." I looked her in the eye and said sternly, "I don't work here." She threw her hands up in the air and started to walk away. As she was walking away, she turned and yelled at me, "This isn't over." I ignored her. I grabbed the last couple of items I needed and headed to the registers and checkout. I noticed the line was not moving, and I could hear that awful woman's voice. She was arguing with a cashier. The cashier called a manager. Other people waiting in line were getting impatient, and it was showing. The manager arrived and instructed the cashier to open another register so that the rest of us, the sane people, could check out. "How come you open a register for them but not for me?" the awful woman yelled at the manager. He replied, "Ma'am, you're at an open register now. What can I help you with?" "I wanted a register opened at the other door, and one of you workers refused to do it." She kept babbling nonsense. I raised my hand and got the manager's attention. The awful woman looked over at me at the same time the manager did. It was her. She wouldn't open a register for me. Then she lied and said she didn't work here, shouted the awful woman. "Ma'am, she doesn't work here," the manager said. "Are you going to help me or not?" she yelled. "I'm trying to help you, ma'am, but you haven't asked for something that I can help you with. If you want to check out, then I'll check you out." The awful woman huffed and puffed and started angrily putting her items on the counter. I was nearly done paying for my items at the other checkout lane when she was done paying for hers. The manager handed her the receipt and told her to have a nice day. As the awful woman was walking towards the door, she paused and shouted, "I guess customer service is dead here." The manager shouted back, "Ma'am, you can call corporate and get out of your system. I'm not going to allow you to disrespect me or my staff." "Oh, I'm definitely calling corporate, and I'm telling them everything that happened here today," she yelled. I was walking past her and said to her, "I'm sure that will be rich. Tell them you need to have your own personal checkout lane while you're at it." She looked at me red-faced and shaking and yelled, "I plan on it," then took off following the sidewalk around the building. As I walked to my car, I was still in shock that someone can be so awful. And this next story is posted by u/Master Witcheress. Your name's not Karen, not my problem. So, for background, I grew up in the hospitality industry with my parents who, to those behind the scenes, shared the power of a general manager, although my dad was the one who holds that position, has for 10 plus years now. Seeing as some of my earliest memories of hotel rooms, front desk, and the general drama that happens behind the scenes, you think I'd be immune or at least more tolerant to BS, but that's a story for another day. As I said, I grew up in this business and helped out a lot, taking shifts occasionally and running errands for whichever my parents were on shift, but I never actually got paid the same as the other employees. By that, I mean my parents paid me from their own pay, which is fine. I hardly did the same amount of work they did in the same amount of time, which meant I wasn't on the payroll. Therefore, I wasn't technically an employee. Remember that, one of the few pieces that will come to play out in my favor. Okay, I also have to mention that my parents have managed more than one hotel in my lifetime, and for the past several years, the common thing is for them to live in the hotel they manage, given it's a completely different state than their house, my house now, thank you. So they have their own room. I can access it when I'm visiting because where I'm there, I pitch in and help out, which commonly requires me to have a master key. Yes, one that opens all the doors. They really don't look that much different from guest keys except for the markings or when the housekeepers wear them on lanyards. And the regular guest keys don't work afternoon, which is a time you must be checked out or you'll be charged for another day. One more piece to remember. There are 5 floors in total, but technically the second floor is where guests can use a side door to access the parking lot and their rooms without going all the way from the lobby. It requires an active key card to work from outside, another piece. I don't tell anyone else this, and it's typically only a few staff members are aware of who I am anyways, the manager's daughter, so it's not really obvious. On my last visit, I was given a master key the day after I got there and was told that they'd call me if they needed my help. I'm typically an introvert and stay in my room playing video games and reading, sometimes wandering out to spend time with my parents. Wearing jeans and a graphic tank top and flannel. Nothing like what the clerks or employees should wear. I left my room with the book in hand, my phone and master key in my pockets, but you could really only see the outline of my phone. Another piece to come into play. This is where background truly ends and the story begins. I was going to head down to the lobby with my book and sit on the couches to read, to hang out with my mother on her shift. She's a bookworm, so we tend to read in silence together. When as soon as my door closed, the hairs on the back of my neck stood up and I could feel a disturbance in the force. Lo and behold, from behind me, I hear the sound of a wild Karen. "Excuse me." My first thought was, oh boy. My second thought was, how fast can I annoy her? Yeah, I'm an introvert, but that doesn't mean I'm uncomfortable with drama or people. I prefer to hibernate in the comfort of my living space. Big difference. In fact, on occasion, when confronted with, confrontation, I find I enjoy myself when I annoy the ever-loving snot out of them. I mean, I didn't ask for you to bother me, so that's your problem. I digress. This lady is what I classify as your stereotypical Karen. Seems put together on the outside, but on the inside is just a shitstorm of entitlement and lack of empathy. I won't describe what she looks like because then people from the hotel will know exactly who she is. Anyways, I turned to face her, where I had been just about to step away from my room door, replying with, "You're excused," which I know for a fact tends to piss people off. But to be fair, it's what one is supposed to say at one's dinner table in response. Yeah, we're not at a dinner table, but still. You need to help me right now. My third thought is, now where have I heard that one before? Oh, right, this is Karen. No, I don't. I'm just trying to go to the lobby. Oh, no, you're not. You're going to help me. Okay, this is where I realized I had 2 major options. A, get pissed and lower myself to her level, or B, ride this out to the perfect "I don't work here, lady" moment. While option A was tempting, I decided that I could hold off on reading for now. Fine, what do you need help with? Well, you need to start doing your effing job and bring my bags out to my car. Whoa, hold up. The hotel employees do not do that. We weren't that big of a building or business to warrant bellboys, and we had luggage carts and elevators for that particular reason. As far as I know, guests tended to understand that. Until now. Ha, fine. You know what? I'll go along with it. So I head with Karen to her room, which was 4 doors down from mine, and she shoves this large suitcase, I'm talking everything but the kitchen sink large, into my hands and carries this tiny bag instead. The suitcase does have a handle, but when I reach for it, Karen snaps at me. No, I said to carry it out. No, you didn't. Karen gasped at me for a moment before replying with, "Yes, I did, and do your effing job and do not talk back to me. I'm a guest." So Karen is striding ahead of me by a few paces while I'm somewhat struggling to carry this large suitcase, and by the time I get to the elevator, Karen is already standing beside it, where I set the bag down for a moment to catch my breath because, dang, that was pretty much my exercise for the week. "Hurry up or you're fired." I really could have broken the pretense right there, but I decided that at this side door is where I'll drop the bomb. Karen hops into the elevator, and by the time I'm able to pick up her suitcase, she's already heading down. So, on the stairs, I simply push her suitcase down each flight, hoping that I'm smashing a few breakables in the process. Yes, I was petty. Didn't care. Karen is already out the side door by the time I reach the bottom with her suitcase. She didn't even notice that it had hit the bottom somewhat loudly. Before I pick it up, I checked the time on my phone, 1:36 p.m. Karen was surely about to be charged for another day, or had been already. She hadn't been out of her room long enough to have met the 12 noon deadline, obviously. Therefore, her card would not work. Ah, karma. You show up just when I need you. So I walk over to the door with her suitcase in hand and open it, nearly throwing it out the door, and Karen screeches when I do. "You can't do that. I'm going to have your job for that, you useless piece of shite, F&B." So, not really mad, I stare at Karen amidst her rage beginning to rise when I don't start begging for forgiveness and simply say, "You can't really take what I don't have to begin with." "What? What do you mean?" I take a small step back from the door, but I keep my body kind of leaned forwards with my eyes locked on hers so she doesn't notice the moment. I would have called her lady in this next part if she hadn't cursed at me and called me a bee and useless. "I don't work here, Karen. Thanks for staying," I say in a falsely cheery voice before I slam the door shut with all my might. The electronic lock clicks into place, thus leaving her outside. Did I forget to mention that she still had things in her room? Well, yeah, she was charged for another day. And even told my mother about the rude bellboy, "I'm a girl and present as one," WTF, locking her out. My mother tried to explain to her that since she wasn't checked out or out of the room after 12, then she would be charged for another day, and that her key card was only programmed for the night she had paid for. Oh, and that we don't have bellboys. Karen eventually got her stuff, but still had to pay, and didn't get her security deposit back since she'd apparently damaged the door frame to her room. All in all, bellboy 1, and Wild Karen 0. Thanks for reading. And this story is posted by u/postmodern hippie goth. An entitled dad ignores his little girl as she breaks her arm, so he tries to sue Starbucks. Starbucks, mid-2000s, summer afternoon, paraphrase for short reading. Outside my old Starbucks is a small garden with some trees, some flowers, and a 3-foot-tall rock wall perimeter. The 3-foot-tall rock wall has been neglected over the years, and several rocks are prone to uncontrollable shifting whenever too much weight is applied. It is a decoration wall, not a jogging wall. Most parents advise their children not to run along the wall. Until today. A little girl is running laps along the unstable garden wall while her entitled dad is on his cell phone and ignoring her. Knowing that our garden wall is unstable, I ask the little girl to stop. She ignores me, so I advise her dad of the possible danger. Me: "Sir, could you please ask your daughter to stop running laps along the unstable garden wall?" Entitled dad: "Why?" Me: "The garden wall is unstable. She could easily hurt herself." Entitled dad: "Are you in charge here?" Me: "No." Entitled dad: "Then don't tell me what to do." I relay the necessary information to the shift supervisor, who is presently in charge. Shift supervisor: "Sir, could you please ask your daughter to stop running laps along the unstable garden wall? The garden wall is unstable and she could easily hurt herself." Entitled dad: "Are you in charge here?" Shift supervisor: "Yes, I am." Entitled dad: "I don't tell you how to make coffee. Don't tell me how to raise my kid." Minutes later, a rock in the garden wall collapses beneath the little girl's feet. She loses her footing, falls 3 feet, and breaks her arm. The shift supervisor and I witnessed the whole thing. Fortunately, a third member of staff is an ex-reservist who knows first aid. Upon learning what has happened, he grabs the first aid and rushes to the scene. Ex-reservist: "Hello, little girl. I know first aid. May I help you?" The little girl nods her head, crying too hard to speak. While the ex-reservist is applying ice and a splint to the little girl's arm, her entitled dad ignores them both, choosing instead to yell at the shift supervisor. Entitled dad, screaming: "Where is your manager? I'd like to know why you didn't maintain your garden wall." In actuality, the garden wall is the responsibility of our landlord and not of the Starbucks coffee company. None of this information is making the little girl feel better. Entitled dad threatens us with a lawsuit for the next 15 minutes, repeating the same phrases ad nauseum. Where is your manager? Why didn't you maintain your garden wall? After he has satisfied himself with his yelling, he acknowledges his daughter and drives her to the hospital, barely thanking the ex-reservist for tending to her injury and her pain. The following day, entitled dad returns with his daughter and a lawyer. The lawyer takes statements from the ex-reservist, the shift supervisor, and myself. Entitled dad wanted to sue Starbucks for 5 figures, but in the end, a lawsuit never materialized. To the best of my knowledge, the little girl made a full recovery. FAQs. There were some details with which I didn't want to bore you with, but since some of you have asked, here they are. Was the ex-reservist technically permitted to administer first aid? Yes, he was. Were you technically permitted to talk to the entitled dad's lawyer? Yes, we were. Our manager was present for each interview. We also gave statements to the Starbucks lawyer, which was also done in the presence of our manager. What's with your dialogue? No one talks like that. I know. I paraphrased to get the point across. Are you lying? Did this happen? I am not lying. This happened. This has been the best of r/, presented by TNA Top Notch Audio. Now do us a huge favor and comment below. Tell us which of those stories are your favorites and why. Also, make sure if you have not done so, of course, but also subscribe if you have not already done so to the TNA Top Notch Audio channel. And make sure you also tell your family, tell your friends, tell your coworkers, tell your neighbors, tell everyone about TNA Top Notch Audio. And we look forward to providing more videos for you and your enjoyment in the future. Have yourselves a great day.